Kindred Longevity Lifestyle Designers. This is Zach here with secretsoflongevity.com, and I'm going to do a Q&A session here. But before I get into those questions, I wanted to let you know a few things. Number one is that my last video, which I posted 2 or 3 days ago, was covering some new announcements that I was making. I was really wanting people's feedback on any ideas they had pertaining to the program I'm going to be releasing. So if you haven't seen that video yet, I really encourage you to check that out. I'll put a link in the drop-down menu so that you can click that and watch that. It's a short, less than 10-minute video. And I'm really wanting people's feedback. I need your help so that I can cover any bases that I haven't covered yet. There's a little less comments than usual on that video. Perhaps I could have come up with a better title to attract people to actually watch it, but here I am just saying, check it out again if you haven't. The other thing is that there's a sale going on right now at Surthrival. It's a 10-day sale, and it ends, I believe, on the next Sunday, so a week from the recording of this video. And it's 10% off everything on your order. And all you need to do is enter the coupon code SOLSTICE, SOLSTICE. So you can find a link below as well to get to Surthrival. That link supports me if you want to go through that. And yeah, again, 10% off everything. It's a great deal. If you haven't seen me talk about Surthrival's products in the past, I've got 2 articles below that you can check out if you want to read about pine pollen powder or colostrum. I haven't done one yet on elk antler, but I will in the future. All of these are phenomenal Yin Jing building tonics. And they have some other products on the page too. They also just released the dual extraction reishi and chaga tinctures. And what that is obviously, you know what reishi and chaga is, medicinal mushrooms that are very powerful at boosting immune health. They're immunomodulatory mushrooms. They have other properties to them as well. I'll also stick a link below to an article on reishi that I wrote quite a while ago that gets a lot of hits on my site. And yeah, dual extraction means that they've first extracted these herbs in alcohol, and they're in, at least in medicinal mushrooms and several other types of herbs, there's both water-soluble and oil-soluble nutrients and constituents and medicinal properties. So when you use alcohol, which is what oil-soluble nutrients dissolve into or extract into, you're going to miss out, if that's all you're doing, on the water-soluble nutrients, and vice versa for if you're just doing a hot water extraction, and you're going to miss out on the oil-soluble constituents. So by first doing the alcohol extraction, and then afterwards with the same material that was just extracted in the alcohol, after say 2 weeks, you do a decoction, and then you simmer that down until it's almost like a syrupy sludge, and you add that back into the alcohol solution, and there you have a very concentrated dual extraction medicinal mushroom product. So there's those 2 products that are new. Not very many organic dual extracted mushroom products on the market, so definitely check that out. So the first question is from Chi on Facebook, and he's asking if a person is strong at birth, whether this means that they have an abundance of yin or yang jing energy, sort of that foundational energy in the body. And this is a bit of a difficult question to answer, just because on one hand I don't know exactly what you're saying in terms of strong. That can mean a whole variety of things. And also there are different factors at play. Different levels of different energies in the body will create different results. So I'm going to try and answer a broad spectrum of possibilities as to what you might be referring to. So just basically strong in terms of physical strength and like really robust body, big musculature, and overall good genetics in terms of physicality. That's going to be a result of sort of more a chi-based energy. So if you have a lot of chi in your body, you're going to be able to feed the musculature so that it stays large. So people, when they have low chi, which is basically, you could say, in some respects, it's a byproduct of digestion, so it's the glucose and everything that feeds muscles after exercise. If you don't have enough of that, you're going to waste away in your musculature. So you need an abundance of that, especially while growing as a young child into an adolescent. And then also, to a certain extent, you're going to have inherited that, so it's going to be Yin Jing, but also how strong your hormones stay So even if you have a very muscular father, if you are born into a family and you're being fed out of a plastic bottle that's being heated in the microwave, you're getting BPA that way, you're getting all sorts of synthetic xenoestrogens in your body, perhaps you're being fed tofu or soy formula. So all these things will depress the hormonal power that your body would naturally have if you were still eating the traditional diet your parents' ancestors ate. And so even if your ancestors had really good, robust genetics in terms of their physical strength and prowess, that would have reduced because of the hormone depressing effects of the lifestyle. So Yin Jing, which is the hormonal abundance in the body, and if we're specifically thinking about males in terms of being very large and muscular from even as a child, there's obviously bigger children who excel at athletics more than their peers, there's going to be a component of higher testosterone, higher human growth hormone at various times in their development. So really it's a broad base of things that would affect the overall physical strength of a child and as a young adult. Now in terms of actually being able to have really robust health, so you can be very large, strong, and look like an imposing figure, but you might only live to be 60-something or 70-something, yet someone of a much smaller stature might outlive someone by decades, because what creates longevity is not always in line with robustness in terms of size. The two can go hand in hand, but it's not a rule, you could say. So having really good health in terms of a child being born healthy and not getting sick much at all as a child, and not getting sick much at all throughout life, that's going to be dependent on both yin and yang jing as well, but also on lifestyle and diet. To a certain extent, yin jing, as it's the foundation, is going to support overall health the most, because if that's depleted, everything else can go out of whack. It's sort of the foundation of the foundation. And you also have to consider that the so-called runt of the litter when it comes to animals or even humans, when there's an exceptionally small child that's born, it's generally thought of in terms of that philosophy of Jing, Qi, and Shen, that that child is very depleted in Jing, whether it was from the mother's choice in diet, some sort of just abnormal development for whatever reason. Could be environmental, could be dietary. But when we're talking about specifically genetics, you have to have really depleted genetics to consistently get that sort of result when someone's trying to bear children. I tend to think that diet can really vastly make up for that, and especially over the generations. If you were to take a population today in some part of the world that is eating a very depleted diet, such as in Western society, in a sort of lower income household, really eating a lot of junk food, and you were to take them aside and give them the best diet that we can think of, rich in fat-soluble vitamins and minerals, animal foods, plant foods, mineral-rich foods, organically grown, etc., we're going to see the improvement over the long term. So basically the answer is hard to pinpoint exactly what you're asking, but that was my interpretation of when a child is born physically strong, what's the cause of it. And it's both yin and yang jing, but it's also the qi, if we were to talk about the influence of the diet of the mother and the child as after they're being born. Gruffes has asked, what is my take on the different diets out there? The sun's gotten pretty strong here. I hope my face doesn't look too washed out and I'm squinting too much, but there is so many different opinions when it comes to diet. It is hard to know who to trust and who to go by. I generally have talked about 4 things you should take into consideration with your own health before making any sort of lifestyle change or diet as being a major component of lifestyle. You want to look at these to decide what's going to be the best for you, and then it might change even after that, even if it does seem to correlate with many of these factors I'll talk about. So you've got personal experience. So basically, if something's not working for you, no matter who's promoting it, what they're saying, it's not working, and you're sick, you need to change. It could be that you're not doing the diet properly, but you need to make some sort of change as to your current choice in what you're doing, and specifically with diet, what you're eating, and you have to really dig deep and look at whether you're getting trapped in holding on to certain emotional attachments to certain foods that you wouldn't be eating in this dietary paradigm, or it might be that you're simply not getting certain nutrients from foods that you need to get somewhere else, or it could be you're not eating enough, it could be you're eating too much. The next thing would be looking at the science behind a specific dietary paradigm. So you have the epidemiology, you have the controlled studies, which are probably more important than the epidemiology. In fact, they are definitely more important. And you also have the understanding of nutrition. What does the body need? What do we know we need? And what do people generally tend to lack on certain dietary pursuits? The next factor would be looking at ancient cultures and ancient peoples and looking at what they did. So it's important to recognize that if we evolve for a long period of time doing something in a certain way, in a specific way, and it might even be just the past 1,000 years, it could be several millions of years of the way we've been doing something, that has a big impact on what we're designed to consume, how we're designed to live. You've heard me talk about these things, and that's a very important thing to consider, despite the fact that it flies in the face of some of the mainstream medical thought on diet. You're not going to take any one of these things on its own and just run with it. You want to try and make sure that they all come into alignment. So the other thing is also the results people are getting. So if you see someone looking really vibrant doing something, that's they're probably doing something correct, but it doesn't always mean that everything they're doing is correct. And if you see someone that's not doing that well, but is still promoting something, it doesn't mean that what they're doing is completely wrong, but it doesn't mean that it's definitely doesn't mean that it's right either. You also should look at several people within a group. So if we were to say, you know, there's this one person I saw eating a paleo diet who had a bit of a gut on them, so they were a little bit overweight, yet you don't know their past history, you don't know what their lifestyle, other factors are like, you don't know all these other things that are going on, and you make that judgment, yet 95% of the other people that are following this kind of paradigm are doing great. They're slim and trim and physically fit and are able to be fit and exercise quite productively. If you focus on that one person, it's really not a good, accurate representation of the potential that that diet has. I could say the same thing for vegan diets. You can see there's obviously people that have failed really hard on it, but there's people that are thriving. I don't deny that. But we have to look at the long-term sustainability of these things, and you should definitely take into consideration what works best for you, because people do function differently on different diets. A big factor is your genetic ancestry. We have to look at the fact that agriculture started more than 10,000 years ago in certain parts of the world, the Middle East and Asia, whereas the more recent groups that were hunter-gatherers that changed over to agriculture more slowly was in sort of descending order would be Europe. So if you have a lot of European ancestry, you're probably more able to eat a more hunter-gatherer based diet. And then even less so in Africa, they were slower to change over to agriculture, and then also probably the least adapted to agriculture is the natives from North America. So if you have ancestry that's more predominantly from that more Western hemisphere, then you're going to be more able and probably see better results with a hunter-gatherer diet. But personally, I think everyone does better with a more hunter-gatherer based diet, but you're going to see the biggest changes in the people that are really not adapted to grains at all and some of the other products of agricultural living. So I'm a fan of constantly experimenting, self-experimenting, but also using common sense and looking at the science and not getting trapped in sort of a narrow box. Because that is when people get stuck on something and they start having health problems and they don't know what's going on, and they are just in denial. So Ed has asked whether taking too much SHOU, or basically any other yin tonic herb, drown out the yang of the Yin Jing. So there's going to be different answers depending on what system of Chinese herbalism you consult, because even within Chinese herbalism there's sort of smaller factions that have different takes on things. There's some people that say you shouldn't tonify too much, which is a little silly considering the benefits we see in people that liberally use tonic herbs and the understanding we have of tonic herbs. But my thought is that Yin Jing can't be overdone. Obviously there's certain Yin Jing tonics that have a more dampening quality, which technically you could overdo, but you'd want to combine them with something, whether it's something to help digest it. So Romania, for example, is often prescribed to go along with more warming herbs, or herbs that absorb excess moisture in the digestive system, or things like cinnamon or ginger, or any of these sort of damp dispersing herbs. So using Yin Jing tonics if you're depleted in yang isn't going to be a problem in terms of drowning or reducing the yang. It might actually help support it a little bit because you need both to a certain degree thrive. And obviously if you're depleted in yin, you're going to start to become depleted in yang. If you bring up the yin, your body will naturally start to bring in more of those androgenic qualities, the hormonal benefits. So if you think about it, like if we associate Yin Jing with a good night's sleep has an effect on the yin, like in that way. And when you've really restored that yin, your body's more able to produce a lot more testosterone, a lot more of the beneficial hormones that you get produced when you're asleep, and your body goes into repair, and so you can have a bigger and stronger outburst of energy later in the day. So indirectly, raising and tonifying yin affects and brings up the yang. I mean, if you've really got that depressed, you should probably consider taking some Yang Jing tonics to help bring that up. Now, when it comes to tonifying the yang without tonifying the yin, that can be a bit of a problem, because when you have high yang without the yin, you're more prone to do things that might deplete it even more. So if you've got a lot of yang fiery energy in you, and you're ejaculating excessively, or you're overexerting yourself in the gym with a lot of intense training, you're going to find that you start to get depleted in the yin even more so, because you're not getting the restoration, whether it's from over-exercise and you don't have the reserves to bring that back up, or in the case of ejaculation, you're just depleting that even more. Yet you have the raging sex drive, but you don't have the mineral reserves and the fatty acid reserves, and basically the foundational power to restore a healthy amount of those sexual fluids. So I'm a big fan of tonifying the yin. Not all Yin Jing tonics are cold. SHOU is a bit warming. So when you hear the word yin and think cooling, it doesn't mean that it's cooling. It has a cool quality in the sense of targeting the cooler aspects of our body, but the herb could be warming. Romania tends to be a little bit cooling, whereas SHOU is more warming, and there's some Yang Jing tonics which technically could be a bit cooling as well. So it gets a little complex, but the overall thing I should emphasize is that tonic herbs can be used quite safely. And obviously when you start having experiences like diarrhea, headaches, nausea, vomiting would be a pretty extreme one, but any of those you're probably overdosing slightly, and you could scale it back, but there's should be no fear in taking it daily. With the more intense herbs like ginseng, you might start seeing some negative side effects. I used to get rashes from ginseng, but that's more the lower quality ginseng. So just take that into consideration, and don't be afraid to use SHOU daily. It's my favorite all-time herb, and you can check out links below if you want to grab some of that yourself, whether you want to make it in a tea or use the powdered extract just to add directly to smoothies. It's a great herb to use on its own. It's been used on its own as well as in formula for eons, thousands of years, and there are certain tonic herbs that are better to take in formula. Like I said, Romania is much better to take in combination. So the last question is from Mr. Ousty, and he's asking what the pros and cons are of caffeine consumption. He gives a bit of his own experience. He feels calmer without caffeine, but he sees that there's studies promoting the health benefits of it, and specifically coffee drinking. And yeah, that's an interesting thing to take into consideration, because a lot of these foods that people are against in some circles, other circles say they're beneficial and healthful. A lot of the research says coffee is beneficial, but you also have to look at the types of people they're studying. One of the biggest studies that people quote when saying coffee is healthful is the Nurses' Health Study. And this is a study on nurses all across the US, I believe, in most of the states at least. And because they're nurses, they're getting a whole bunch of health factors checked regularly. They just track their statistics, and obviously they ask them questions about lifestyle. And then there's a bunch of different things they've gotten from this in terms of looking at the results of their lifestyle. So it's connected a reduction in Alzheimer's and better energy levels to your consumption of coffee in the long run. And those who drank the most coffee, like ridiculous amounts, like 12 cups a day, had less Alzheimer's. So yes, caffeine has the ability to stimulate more blood flow to the brain. It's going to keep things clear in that regard. But we also need to consider that those people are in very intense environments. So if you're in a really intense situation, you need that artificial boost. That could be more health beneficial than if you were not having it. So I'm personally not a fan of stimulants in excess in the diet. A little bit here and there is fine, but I think most people do better without them, and that's most people's experience. That's why caffeine gets a pretty bad rap in most health circles. But obviously if you are in a job that you're at the moment not able to get out of, you need the financial abundance and you need that stimulation. That's probably better than trying to force yourself to go through the day feeling lethargic. Now there's obviously dietary factors that could help support that. Taking Yin Jing tonic herbs and some of the things I've already talked about in this video here could be of benefit to replacing coffee. But when we see people eating factors like the processed food diet and they're using coffee, we can just say, well, if we're eating a very far removed diet that's very healthy, and we know that there's a lot of health-giving nutrients in this, we're eating blueberries perhaps, and that's beneficial for preventing Alzheimer's, we don't have to rely on that one positive factor of coffee when there's obviously clearly negative effects. Coffee or caffeine definitely increases cortisol levels, it increases adrenaline levels in the blood, and it's a burden on the adrenals. So that's directly affecting the Yang Jing qualities that we want to preserve if we want to feel vibrant when we're not consuming that product, herb, or food. So take that into consideration. Make your own judgment call on this. There's definitely a few other benefits to coffee. It has antioxidants, but we can get antioxidants from a whole lot of other foods. So my take is that stimulants should be much lower on the list of what we take in. And with that, check out those links below. Post your comments and questions below for future Q&As, and embrace life without limits.